This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
Really fun slate in the NFL for week number 7. We have got the Dolphins and the Eagles on Sunday Night Football. We've got the Ravens and the Lions, which is a really fun game. Chiefs and Chargers, always pretty entertaining too. So a good slate coming up. We're going to break down those key games across week 7 in the NFL by talking to Dr. Ed Feng, getting his read on them based on his numbers at the Power Rank, and getting you set for week number 7. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as mentioned by Dr. Ed Feng. You can find his work at thepowerrank.com and check him out on Twitter at thepowerrank. And Ed, yesterday on the show, you were wearing Michigan attire. Today it is Detroit Lions attire. It is the Ed Feng apology tour. But Ed, when we talked yesterday with the Michigan stuff on, it came out today that there's like this sign stealing investigation of Michigan. So tomorrow we find out that like Jared Goff is secretly on PEDs, or what's entail for Detroit now?
Probably the entire NFL is on PEDs, so I'm not too worried about that one. I just saw the Michigan sign stealing thing, read a little bit about it on Yahoo. Really don't know anything at all. Obviously, we'll see how it goes. I think a lot of college football fans are really questioning how to take anything from the NCAA at this point in the game, and whether the NCAA will even be relevant in football in the near future. So, but yeah, obviously don't want to steal signs and do anything unethical. So definitely keeping an eye on it.
I'm curious how this will affect the relationship between John Harbaugh and the NCAA, because they seem to be on such good terms. Sure this will shore things up even more.
You mean Jim?
Yeah, Jim Harbaugh. Yes, thank you. I had the Ravens on the rundown. I had John on my mind.
Yeah. For sure. We'll see. They're definitely not in a good relationship.
It is not. We'll talk about the other Harbaugh later on, because that game between the Ravens and the Lions week is going to be a thriller. We'll talk about Ed, why he's wearing that hat, and much more to get you ready for week 7 in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or over on Spotify as well. Do not forget that our Thursday Night Football preview with Tom Vecchio is now up, breaking down the Jaguars and the Saints. You can find that on the Covering the Spread podcast feed and over on FanDuel TV Plus. Tom is with you again tomorrow as well, previewing Sunday Night Football between the Dolphins and Eagles. We'll also talk about that on the show here later on today. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That is $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, totals, and more. So visit FanDuel.com and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager. Only $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expires 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org/Chat, Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700. Visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland, 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. We'll dig into that Ravens versus Lions game here in just 1 second. But first, Wanted to talk to you, Ed, about scoring, because scoring has been down overall so far this year. About, I think it's 43.5 as a league-wide scoring average so far. And, that can be fluky. It's a small sample, but typically, at least I've always thought the scoring is higher early on in the year because quarterbacks are largely healthier and there's not as much bad weather early on. So I'm a bit surprised to see it be low at this point in the year. So when you look at the data, is this something you expect to persist, or could it be just the product of variance and a small sample?
Right. I mean, I'm getting that scoring is down about 1.5% from last year. So it's not a ton, but I mean, it is points. It is a decline. And then I kind of checked at my favorite passing metrics to see what they said, and actually passing success rate has been about the same. It's about 42.7% both this year and last season. But then I started digging into some other stuff. Yards per pass attempt is actually down 2.7%. And then I kind of checked the previous years. There's actually been a pretty constant decline since 2020 in that quantity. I don't know if that's different schemes and more too high safeties and, preventing more deep passes. Then I also looked, there's actually been a decline in passing success rate from 2020 to now as well. There hasn't been over the last season, but there's been a little bit of a decline. So I actually see that this might persist a little while. And I feel like if it does persist, we're going to see some rule changes in the offseason because that's not good for business in the NFL. But, when I look at it right now, it kind of does look like this is something that could persist.
Yeah, I think that for me, we saw this a couple years ago where they were calling more holding penalties, and that led to a decrease in scoring then as well. And then they backed off that later on in the year. I haven't seen anything like that this year, which I think is another reason why I'm more inclined to potentially buy into the dip. And again, it's the point in the year in which the dip is occurring, with it being so early on when quarterbacks are largely healthy. I think that seeing that makes me more inclined to believe that it could be legitimate. And I think that honestly, your explanation potential of like the more 2-eye safeties would make a lot of sense, because success rate would be steadier. It would be less impacted by that, as opposed to looking at yards per pass attempt, because you're not going to get as many chunk plays. So right. I think they're looking like explosive play rate may be a way to kind of track this and stuff like that. Sure. We saw it primarily with like the Chiefs and Mahomes, but like I think it's gone more, more broad than just that team where you're using the more, I don't know, like the more passive approach in order to prevent big plays.
Right. I mean, we're seeing a lot of explosive offenses, and I think there probably is a tendency to play 2-high safeties. I'm sure someone has that data.
Probably.
Sounds like.
I mean, I have it in Next Gen Stats. I could pull the rates, but they don't do the rates for you, so I have to like divide, and it's an effort. So I can dig into it, but I haven't. All
right. Get a little homework assignment for next week.
Yeah.
So I mean, we'll see about this. I mean, I do think it's interesting. It could be, it could persist going into the future. This also brings up something interesting. When I had Fabian Suma on my podcast the other week, I asked him about totals and how often he bets totals compared to spreads. And he actually said he doesn't bet totals as much. And part of the reason is that he feels like it's very sensitive to the overall scoring environment. And he doesn't have as good of grasp of that. So I thought that was pretty interesting. That's why he does tend to stick to spreads. And I mean, certainly don't go blindly betting the under these days, but that is definitely a trend to keep in mind.
I do find it very interesting that the market is I'm still below market on a lot of totals, is I guess the way I'd phrase that. Like looking at totals this week, I bet 7 so far, and I've had 4 unders, 3 overs. If I look at the average total for the first 6 weeks, at open has been 44.6. And the average total for my model has been 44.1. So it does seem like bookmakers have still been a little bit high.
Right.
And like, I mean, my ROI on totals is like 2% this year. So it's not like I'm like crushing by being below market on these things, but like, I do think that like we haven't seen a total adjustment from bookmakers yet, with regards to this. Like I have not adjusted the baseline scoring down because like it does revolve around a baseline league-wide average. I've not taken that number down yet, but I do still see value in unders more often than I see overs. Like it's not like a universal thing. Like again, it's 4 this week, 4 unders versus 3 overs. So it's not universal, but I haven't seen a situation where suddenly there's been an overcorrection in dragging totals down too low.
Do you know what it is for the closing market?
Yeah. So closing market, average closing market has been 44.1. So it's actually come down to a half point on average.
Makes sense.
Let me make sure mine hasn't. Average for me at close has been 44.1. So it's been, it's been coming down throughout the week, which I think does align with kind of what you were saying, where, I guess it's a counter to the player prop discussion where totals tend to go up during the week. If you want to bet unders, bet them late in the week. If you want unders in the NFL, probably good to get them. Like last week, when it became apparent the weather was going to be very bad, totals crashed on Monday. So you wanted to get those right away. I think that for these, it's important to look at weather, honestly, as soon as Monday, because wind is stickier than rain and stuff. So I pull the weather on Monday and we'll bet based on that. But yeah, we have seen totals come down during the week.
Have you checked whether it's down just because of the last couple of weeks where we've had more windier conditions?
Let me see here. So last week, my average total was 43.7. So that's pretty low. And the average for books at close was 43.8 or 43.9. So it was lower last week. I know week 2 there was more scoring. Week 5. Let's see, week 5 here. Week 5 was not as windy. Week 5, the average actual points was 45. Average points for my model was 43.8, or sorry, 44 flat. And the average total for bookmakers was 44.9. So in that week, it was higher. So it's kind of just like last week, the weather may have dragged things down a decent amount.
Yeah.
Actual number of points scored last week average was 37. So that definitely did bring things down. A lot of that was because of weather there, at least.
Or Cleveland's defense. They are definitely
dragging things down as well. And the total discussion does play into our first game of the week. That is the Lions, the Ravens, because Ed, I took the over in this game, even though there are 15-mile-per-hour winds, because I like both these offenses. I think both these defenses are very good, but I still think the total is low. I have it at 44.5, and the total is 42.5 right now, even with the wind being accounted for in my model. My model cares a lot about wind, so it is dinging this game for that, but I feel like it's a fun game. Right now, the Ravens are 3-point favorites. Total is 42.5, and this Lions team, Ed, beat the Chiefs in week 1, but the schedule since then has been pretty soft. So can the Lions legitimize their hot start in this game against the Ravens?
Yeah, I mean, they're not favored, and they shouldn't be favored. Baltimore is a pretty good team. But first, let's talk about Detroit, right? I doubted this offense at the beginning of the year, took Kansas City week 1. Probably should have won that Kansas City bet, but I have been wrong about the persistence of this Detroit pass offense. They're 4th in my adjusted success rate, 2nd in adjusted yards per play. So I bought the hat, and I'm trying not to implode with warmness because of this, the warmth of this hat. Trying to do that. I'm actually doing all right so far.
Yeah.
So I feel like Detroit has, they're a serious contender in the NFC. They are doing really well in throwing the ball, which is the stickiest thing in football. Now, their defense isn't great, but we did talk about how they made improvements on that side of the ball. They're actually 15th in my adjusted passing success rate. That's kind of a miracle. So they're looking decent on that side of the ball. They took a big jump after their performance last week against Tampa Bay. But it obviously gets a lot harder against Baltimore. This is a team that has been pretty good. I feel like we were pretty lucky to find some value on Baltimore last week against Tennessee in London. And I just kind of look at teams based only on data this year. So throw out all the preseason prior, look at passing success rate, yards per play, yada, yada, yada. Baltimore is actually 2nd in the NFL behind only San Francisco at this point in the season for me. They are rightfully favored. The markets are no longer kind of ignoring them. I have Baltimore by about 3.7 points here. Not seeing any value. The total is interesting. I mean, I actually make this closer to 49. And then even if you adjust for the win, that suggests some value on the over. I don't really trust my totals model, but it is definitely pointing that way. It is seeing the same things that you are seeing.
Yeah, so if I have the wind at 15 miles per hour, which is the current projection, I have the total at 44.1. If I drop that to 0, it's 46.7. So not quite as high as yours, but still very high. And like, I don't know, I guess I'm a bit surprised it's that low. It's been bouncing back and forth. It was at 41.5. I haven't bet it yet because I thought that, I was waiting to see if I could get to 41. I did take it when it got to 41. I was hoping I could get to 40.5, but looked like it was going back up. So I did take it there, but I think 42.5, there's still a bit of value. Even if that win were to go down a bit, it'd be even a better value. So I do think that the over is the best way to bet this game right now. I did take the Lions money line earlier on. You know, I've been high on the Lions for a long time. That's been profitable. It's been a good thing, but like,
it's great.
I get why you'd like the Ravens here too, because I think the Ravens have been bit by weird timing of things. Like they've had everyone has drops, everyone has bad penalties, but they've all come at extremely inopportune times for the Ravens, it seems like.
Sure.
So it seems like they've been on the very, very bad end of variance when it comes to those weird fluky things.
Well, it seems like the market is accounting for it properly now.
Correct. Exactly. Okay. Let's talk here about this fun afternoon game between the Chargers and the Chiefs. So right now, the Chiefs are 5.5 point favorites. Total in this game is 47.5. And Ed, we were both in the Chargers last weekend. They were frustrating for sure. And even tougher task this week, especially with this game being on the road. So what's your view of the Chargers in this one?
Right. I mean, last week on Monday night was pretty frustrating. What did Herbert? I mean, they had a couple fourth down fails, right? That didn't help them get back into the game. And it looked like both my side and my pick prop were going to lose. And of course, Justin Herbert helps me out by throwing a pick on basically the last play of the game. So that made up for it a little bit. In terms of this game, you know, Kansas City is kind of an interesting team because, you know, I feel like my numbers are very low on their offense. I have them at 9th. My adjusted passing success rate seems too low, even though they're still figuring out things in terms of receivers. Maybe we'll see a midseason trade. Their defense is actually 3rd, and that's way too high. They're not that good of a defense. They never have been, never really put the resources there. And you can kind of tell, you know, like PFF cover grades, they're 11th in the NFL, which I think 11th is kind of a ceiling for that defense. So, you know, the numbers are kind of off on both sides. I think you'll see the offense go up and the defense come down. You know, the Chargers have been pretty average on both sides of the ball. Overall, I got Kansas City by a little bit more than 6. Not seeing any value in this game for me.
Yeah, I agree with you on the defense where they're probably not going to be as good as they have been, but that did lead to me taking the under on this game earlier on. It was a 49.5, I think, earlier on this week. So I took that when it was there. I don't think there's any more value now because I have it right around 47.5 as far as the total goes for this game. It was, I guess it was 49.5 on Monday for this one. And like, they are not as good as they've played so far. But I think the weird thing about them, Ed, is typically with the Chiefs, what you'll see is actually I got a 50.5. Okay. But like usually what you see with the Chiefs is their defense is rough early on in the year and they get better as the year goes along because Steve Spagnuolo runs this like really complex, weird defense and it takes a while to get them ramped up. But they actually had a lot of continuity this year. So I agree with you. They won't finish 3rd in defense, but I would not be shocked if this winds up being the best Chiefs defense we've seen in quite some time. So I think in general, like when you look at Chiefs games this year, I'd want to lower your thought on the total in your mind because I think we should start respecting the Chiefs defense. Again, adjusting down from where they're at right now, but I think this defense will be good long-term, at least above average. You said 11th. I think that sounds probably about right, but that's also an improvement from where they've been in the past.
Right. I mean, I feel like it's a unit that if they end up in the top 10, that's a great season for them.
Absolutely. And I would not be shocked if they do wind up there. Let's talk now about the Sunday night game between the Dolphins and the Eagles, where right now the spread is 2.5 in favor of the Eagles. Total is 51.5 in this one. And the Dolphins did struggle, Ed, in their one game against a top tier team in the Bills. I believe you were on the Bills in that game. So how do you see the Dolphins faring in this one against the Eagles?
Right. With Miami, it's really about how bad their pass defense has been. They're 30th in my adjusted passing success rate, and you kind of look through it, and they were terrible in that game against Buffalo, which maybe you give them a little bit of a pass. They were terrible against Denver, which back then maybe this was the game that it didn't really matter because they scored 70 points, right? But they allowed Denver pretty high passing success rate. Maybe that's all garbage time, maybe not. But as we continue to get more data on Denver, that continues to look worse and worse. They also allowed New England to move the ball, pretty high passing success rate in that game. That continues to look worse and worse with every week. So that's where they're down at 30th. They're first in offense, which is no surprise to anyone. So for Philly, this is a team that's actually really struggled on the defensive side of the ball. They're 25th in my passing metrics. They should probably be a little bit better. The PFF coverage grade is 21st, but still dealing with injuries back there. And, on offense, they are better. They're 13th in my passing metrics. They're much better in some of my rushing metrics. So my numbers have Philly by about 4. So it's definitely a lean for me. It seems like everyone on both teams is hurt. So it's really hard to kind of, without a player-based model yet to really make sense of how that is going to impact everyone, just because there's so many injuries for both teams. I'm probably going to pass on it, but my numbers would lean Philly.
Yeah, the impactful injuries for the Eagles are you got Jalen Carter, got a limited practice on Wednesday. That's a good thing for them because we saw Breece Hall get a lot of rushing lanes against the Eagles last week with no Jalen Carter. But Devontae Smith didn't practice with a hamstring injury. I had not seen that because he got a target, I think, on the last play of the game for Philadelphia in that Jets game. So I don't know when that injury occurred, and it could just be nothing. Right. But Lane Johnson, ankle injury for him too. We know how important he's been for that offensive line ever since the Carson Wentz days. The splits with and without Lane Johnson were absurd back then. Sounds like he has a shot to play, though. So I wouldn't rule him out, at least yet. As far as the Dolphins go, they've played through a lot of injuries. They've had, with Teron Armstead missing time, Devon Achan's on IR, like they've still played well despite that. But this is a bigger test than what they've had, at least recently, with this Eagles team. So I think that, I think that playing it safe here and not getting involved with this game makes a lot of sense because things could swing a lot. Like it's Eagles by 4 right now in the model, but that could change if we don't get good news on Lane Johnson, if we don't get good news on Devontae Smith, stuff like that. So I think that shying away from it here does make a lot of sense.
Cool.
All righty, Ed. Where else see value at FanDuel Sportsbook across week number 7?
Well, I want to look at the Washington at the New York Giants. This preseason, I would have made Giants more than a 3-point favorite in this game. And when I look at data from the current season, I kind of see two similar teams. So for the pass offense, like they're both pretty bad. Washington's 24th. The Giants are 30th. Obviously, Daniel Jones might not play in this game, but Tyrod Taylor wasn't terrible last week. He actually had a 48.6% passing success rate, pretty good compared to the NFL average of 42.7. Had 5 yards per pass attempt against Buffalo. That's not good compared to the 6.0 NFL average. Taylor also had 3 bad balls for a rate of 8.8%. So that's better than the NFL average of 11.7. Obviously, we're looking at one game, so I don't want to make too much of it. But given how Daniel Jones has played this year, like, is it really that much of a downgrade to the veteran? I'm not so sure about that. And then also the pass defenses look really the same. They both look great by success rate and awful by yards per pass attempt. So Washington's 4th by success rate, 27th by yards per pass attempt. Giants are 6th by success rate, 22nd by yards per pass attempt. So maybe some good defenses, but that haven't been giving up big plays. But I don't think anything kind of preseason we would expected these defenses to be kind of top 10 units. My model hasn't really moved too much on this. I mean, a little bit. My best model has Giants by about 2. No matter what metrics I look at, I can't get to Commanders -3. I just can't. So I like the Giants here. I think a lot of other places were at +2.5. But I like the Giants here.
I do too. I actually have the Giants favored by 3.6. I don't know why this number is where it is. I
have no idea.
Yeah. Like, I also agree with you where it's like, is there actually a big difference between Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor? Like, I don't know.
I mean, there's probably a little bit of a difference, but
sure.
you're relying on Jones to like come back and be better, right?
Right.
And that may happen. That may not happen.
And I think the key thing with the Giants is look at the teams they've played. Like, strength of schedule is still very, very different this time of year as far as from one team to the next. Like, I think their past couple of games have come against the Bills. They faced the Dolphins in there, I believe. Let me just check here quick.
Yeah.
On the Giants.
Bad to the Dolphins, but
what's that?
I mean, they lost pretty bad to the Dolphins, but
yeah, they faced the Bills, Dolphins, Seahawks. Like, that's not the world's best team, but they faced the 49ers, Cardinals, and Cowboys. They have faced 4 of the top 6 or so teams in the league. Right. So I think that it's pretty excusable that they played poorly. And I think that this is, if I were trying to reverse engineer an explanation for why the market is where it is, I feel like we're probably underselling how tough of a schedule the Giants have faced so far.
Okay. Sounds like a good reason to me because I can't really see any other reasons.
Yeah. I agree with you. I took the Giants money line earlier on this week. I also had the under on this game. And like, if you have the under on a total, it was a 40.5 then, it's a 37.5 right now. And you're getting +124 on a team at home in a very, very low scoring game. I feel like you should probably be willing to take the home team there. So I think the Giants are, I agree with you, Ed. I'm confused as why that number is where it is. That's all that we have here for today here on Covering the Spread. Back with you once again tomorrow. We're going to talk to JJ Zachariason, talk about some player props across week number 7 in the NFL. To get that as it is posted, make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts, and check us out on FanDuel YouTube and FanDuel TV Plus. Ed, if people want to check out what you've got going on over at the Power Rank, where can they find all that?
Check out my free email newsletter. It's probably the best place to get started. 5 Nugget Saturday comes in your inbox every Saturday at 10 a.m. Got some good stuff going on for this Saturday already. I usually write about some of the interception props, and that's been going pretty well. Also curate bets from other sharp people. Also have a nice little nugget for people who don't like the Packers this week. So check that out at thepowerrank.com.
All right. You can also find Ed's other podcasts, the Football Analytics Show, wherever you get your podcasts. Find Ed on Twitter at The Power Rank. I am on Twitter at Jim Sonis and on Threads at Jim.Sonis. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your bets across Thursday Night Football. And we'll talk to you once again tomorrow for some player props. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.